No Kurt, no Andrew.
So we're taking over the flip side with the Romeuses and the Caines.
Episode 21, we're gonna argue.
Let's
Here
go.
Well, welcome to episode 21 of The Flip Side. And I brought some friends today.
What up, Karl?
Oh my goodness. We have the brand new campus pastor at our Blue Oaks campus, Mr. Jason Caine.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm not having you. It's not really my show.
Okay.
So I'm just here today
What are you, a guest
substituting for Kurt Harlow, who's substituting for the Pope. So that's what we're doing. And then Jason, you brought someone with you.
I did.
But not a newbie to the flip side.
Yes, this is my wife, Stephanie. She's joining us on the flip side today.
Yes.
And she was on episode, I think, 19 or so. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. She killed it on there.
She did. She did.
I mean, like
Okay.
Well, she's got all types of degrees. I should just call it Dr. Stephanie.
Yeah.
All right.
Stephanie,
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Caine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate you saying
that. And then the best looking guest on our panel today is my wife, Jen Romeus. Jen, welcome to the flip side.
Thank you.
You love being on camera, don't you, babe?
It's the best.
This is your dream. So last week on episode 20, I talked a lot about you.
I know, it's interesting you were on a marriage chat without me.
Well, that's the only way I thought we could get to the heart of things. So, this is going to be a great time. And one of the things that Kurt does, he does this coffee thing. So we have some coffee from the lovely Haley. Haley, what kind of coffee do we have today?
Today you are going to be treated with a single origin from Venezuela with flavor notes of cocoa, sweet caramel, and orange zest.
Oh,
Wow, that sounds. There's water in there. She doesn't want any.
Faker.
Wow, she's faking it.
Stephanie's allergic, remember?
You're allergic to coffee.
I am allergic to coffee.
Wow, so it's just Jason and I.
Yeah,
Who
you
probably
guys have
don't need
that.
caffeine.
We don't.
I'm
need
actually
any.
good.
But you know what I could go for? You said it has notes of caramel. I would love just a cup of caramel. If I could just have
Pour
that.
the caramel
Really, Karl?
straight
Pour it.
into it.
I know.
We'll make sure to do that for your next episode.
For my next episode. Well, this will be the last one. Likely. You know what I mean? So.
That's
Well,
good.
awesome.
That's good coffee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Haley. All right, so we're in the midst of a series called Family 30. Jason, you preached. Did you preach this weekend?
I didn't preach this
You did not
weekend. We
preach
had
this
Bob Ballion over at Blue Oaks.
Ooh,
Crushed
Bob,
it.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
That's great.
Yeah. And Kurt was down at Midtown, and awesome times. Andrew was at Granite Bay. But in the middle of this Family 30 series, where it's all about relationships, marriage, and Kurt said, hey, let's bring on some successful married couples. They couldn't find them, so then we were the next
available.
option. Right. So just kind of getting into it, like nowadays, it feels like marriage is under attack. Like marriage, not just as the institution, but marriage like individuals, two people trying to make it work. It just seems like that's under attack. Dr. Caine, I'm going to start with you.
I'm just here as an accessory.
Like, what are some of the basic steps do you think? Well, now before we get to the solution, why do you think so many marriages are under attack?
I think that, honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but I think technology has a lot to do with it. I think as society is evolving to being more technologically advanced, which means that we're getting used to getting things done our way quickly. We're living in a world that's becoming more and more customized to our needs. And us having to communicate less with people. We're able to go through, make orders through computers. Everything is done a lot quicker and on our own. And so we're having a lot less time practicing communicating with people, practicing waiting and being patient. And those are all skills that you need to have a healthy, successful marriage. So when you're out in the world during the day and at work or just running errands, you're used to just things being customized to you. And then you come home and you're having to make adjustments for somebody else. It's hard to make that transition. And I do think that kind of help. We're being conditioned individualistically in society, and we come home and it's supposed to be a collectivistic experience.
Good answer. Wow. Good answer.
Reverend Romeus. Reverend Romeus. No. You got.
Amen.
No, but I heard you were and you were like
I
giving
agree.
What do you mean you agree? Why? Like
all of us have our phones out on the table. Technology is a big
true.
part of what we do now. And I don't know, like they say, like we have no delayed gratification because of technology. Like we're used to opening our phone, getting what we need. I don't know. I just agree that I never thought of it that perspective. But
And in a marriage, you can't, like, this is not
you
Burger
don't get
King.
what you want. Yeah.
Right.
You do, I like that you say that. Jason, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just
Oh,
talk.
oh,
but
okay.
go ahead.
I was just curious.
I
I'm just
appreciate
over here,
that.
you know.
Yeah.
I have a great answer for the question that
Well,
you're
of
asking.
course you do.
Yeah. I mean, my wife, Stephanie pretty much said it all. But I think that there's a religious reason, too. If you think about this, Karl, if you look at the context of the Bible, where did the very first attack happen? Where did Satan show up?
Between man and woman.
Between man and woman. And
Yeah.
Adam and Eve. When Adam was by himself, we don't hear anything about the serpent. But as soon as Eve shows up, that's when the attack happens. So I think for a long time, because family is God's idea, because God understands that collectively, when people work together, amazing things can happen, that the enemy has been trying to tear that apart from day one.
Yeah.
And so it's not anything new. Certainly, I think the way that marriages break down and the commonality of it happening so much today certainly has to do something with technology. But I think the enemy wants to do everything he can to separate people in marriages.
Yeah, I remember Pastor Ray was saying that, like, hey, if you wanted to destroy the church, Satan doesn't have to do anything else. He just needs to get between man and woman.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just got to get in between that. If you get
Yeah.
between that, then the whole rest of the thing gets all wonky and falls apart. But so tell me this, and I'll throw it to you, Jay. Like, then what are some steps? Because the compatibility thing, I think Andrew talked about that last week. Like, compatibility is like a myth. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
None of us are compatible.
Yeah, none of us are compatible because
Right.
we are human beings,
For sure.
and I want it my way all the time. Right, babe? There it is. So
She didn't argue with
She
you.
didn't argue. She's like, yes, the first right thing you said. So what are some steps do you think that couples, or even those who aren't in marriage yet but are hoping to be in marriage, like, what are some steps that they can take to miss those pitfalls of incompatibility and the expectations that we set of, like, I'm going to have this the way that I want to? I'll throw it out to you, Jay.
Yeah, I think going into marriage, expectations are the key to making sure that you have a successful marriage. A lot of people go into it with these expectations that they get from whatever models that they've seen. So if they saw their parents operate in a certain way, then they look at that model as this is how you do marriage. And when you have two people who are coming together with different models, you're not going to have people who grow together and make long-lasting commitments. So I think understanding expectations from the outset, you can really remedy a lot by giving those expectations. One of the things that I do, I've taken several couples through marriage counseling over the years, and one of the exercises that I do that really goes on a few sessions is I just ask them this question: what do you need? What do you need? And when I put that out to people and I tell them, go home, come back, and let us know in the next session, give me 5 things that you need as an individual. And I get them to answer that, because when people can voice what they need, I think that helps with expectations, right? And needs are such a specific thing to one another. Like, one of the things that I needed in a mate and a spouse was somebody who understood that I worked in ministry, so that meant that our lives weren't going to be consistent and the same all the time.
Yeah.
And having moved several times, gone from Atlanta all the way out to California, Stephanie's been a trooper and been a #1 fan and been on board with it from day one. And I think it's because from the outset, we had conversations around what we expected from one another to help us to ensure that we didn't fall into some of those pitfalls.
Okay, but I'm gonna get in your business real quick, because Kurt did this last week to me, so now I'm gonna do it to you. Steph, what were some of the needs that you had an expectation that Jason would fulfill that very quickly in marriage you realize he ain't getting this?
Hey, Karl. Hey, buddy. We're the counselors, okay?
And you both have counseling degrees too,
Yeah, man.
which is very interesting. We'll talk about that
That's
soon.
a great question.
Okay,
Yeah.
but this is going to be a boomerang session.
You will- let's do it.
We're
Let's
gonna
do
keep
it.
going on
Let's
around
just do
with
it.
this.
Yeah.
I would say, oddly enough, it was stability. And it's funny because, Jason did talk to me before we get married. Like, look, I'm in ministry. And at the time that we met, he had been in there for several years, but he knew where he wanted to go, where he was called to. And he said, I'm not sure what that path is going to look like. Are you going to be prepared for whatever journey? Because I'm going to go where God is leading me, and I need somebody who's going to go with me there. And I thought, yeah, sure, I can do that. But then I quickly, going into marriage, realized, you know what? I really have an appreciation for stability. Wow. I have security in that. And so the unpredictability of waiting on God and going where God is leading you caused some anxiety in me at some points in the marriage. And but that's when I had to check myself and say, wait a minute. This is something I knew I was going into, and I'm just going to have to look at my anxiety as something that's within myself that I need to turn to God to help work out within me so that I don't impose that on Jason and be a barrier to the path that God is setting for him.
So
Does that make sense?
absolutely. So even though it's uncomfortable to you,
Right.
even though it's wasn't probably originally your preference,
Yeah.
you understand that when there's the leave and cleave, now we're one.
Yeah.
So even if I'm not 100% walking in that direction, it's not just putting it on Jason or Jason putting it on you. It's like, hey, I've got to figure this out. I've got to give this to God for him to supplement some of those feelings that sometimes we feel.
Right.
Yeah.
There's tension in commitment.
Ooh, that'll preach.
That's a
Tweet
word.
that.
So-
Tweet that.
That's a word.
Ooh,
There's
say it one more time.
There's
Let me say it like
tension.
there's
Yeah, you do
tension in commitment. That's a word.
That'll preach. Hey, just
Okay, here we go. Two preachers here. Two preachers
We're
here
just
going to
tweeting.
town on this.
Okay.
Elaborate on that,
Yeah.
though.
Oh, just in the process of commitment, you will have your flesh, I guess I would say, just in a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Your flesh is going to want to go internal and to go to whatever comfort level you have. It'll go individualistic. But commitment is there's partnership in that commitment. And so there are some sacrifices you have to make. There's some discomfort. And so that's where that tension comes from. But the thing is, that tension is actually good for you.
Yeah.
It grows you.
But
Yeah, that's
we're
what I was thinking.
sometimes we're conditioned, at least our mind is, psychologically, we have these defense mechanisms that make us run from tension, when in fact we're supposed to actually lean into tension to grow.
Can I be open?
Sure.
Jen's like, don't be too open. No. So even you're talking about that tension and leaning into it sometimes. With Jay, you got 2 degrees in counseling. You got a doctorate in counseling. Counseling is one of those big things in marriage that I think is so often taboo, where it's like, oh, I don't want to go tell anybody my business.
Yeah.
And I remember early on in marriage, probably a little bit like halfway, we've been married 10 years, where I can remember who suggested, it was probably Jen, because she's smarter than me, was like, hey, we need to go to counseling. And not because our life was in a downward spiral, but it was like, it wasn't the best, but you know what I'm saying?
No, but I think at some point you realize like we both have some things we're dealing with, and then we need to deal with them together instead of deal with them against each other. Do you remember like in counseling the counselor put a chair across the table and was like, this is the issue. He is not the issue. Like both of you go against that issue. And till this day, I still think about that whenever we have whatever happens in life. There's tons of things that come up. And
Why do you think that's such a big deal for people? Why is there a stigma around counseling and talking to somebody?
Well, vulnerability has a stigma.
Yeah.
Like that's a big thing. And I think anybody who's done counseling knows it's yucky at first. Like to get better, you have to say all the things that you're dealing with, issues you have, things that have happened to you that you brought with you. So it has to get worse before it gets better.
Right.
And no one wants to go through that.
Right.
No one wants to show up and go, this is going to really be hard for a bunch of sessions. And then it'll get better.
Exactly.
Yep. Now, you guys have actually sat with people and walked through some of that. Where do typically most couples quit when it comes to that counseling? Because I know there's folks watching who are like, "Oh, I'll go to one session," but like you said, babe, it's going to get messy before it gets better. Before it gets better.
You're not enjoying it.
Where's that spot that you see, or what's the topic? What's the issue that usually starts to rub?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is a specific topic or issue, but I would say it's much like working out, right? At the top of the year, a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to start working out. But when you go and you find out it hurts, you're like, I'm not going back to that. And I think what happens is we get comfortable in dysfunction, so we don't want to do anything corrective to get us back on the right path that we need to be on.
Wow.
So when people realize that this is going to take a whole lot of work, when people realize that I'm laying myself out here, I'm being vulnerable, those are difficult things to do. So I think people, when they look at the scenario, they say, all right, I can work things out with this person, with my spouse, but it's going to take work. It's going to be hard. They think that exiting is going to make things easier.
Yeah.
When in reality, in the long run, it makes things a whole lot more difficult. But I see a lot of people give up when they find out that it's going to take work. That they can't, snap your fingers, and they come into the counselor thinking that the counselor is going to fix them in a moment. And that's just not how it is. You didn't get yourself into this trouble overnight.
You ain't getting out of it overnight.
You're not going to fix it overnight.
Yep.
It takes time, and a lot of people don't want to put in the work. Understandably, I have empathy for that. It's hard to put in the work.
Yeah. Steph, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with a point that Jen made earlier about delayed gratification, and that, just the idea that you are going to have to put a lot of work and you're not going to see the results yet. You're not. It's just something that you've got to wait later, and you've got to be really uncomfortable in that. And also, I think that what we can't put aside is that some people go into counseling with the wrong intentions.
Okay.
Sometimes it's misguided intentions, and sometimes it is guided wrong intentions. Wanting to fix the other person. Oh, I'm going to counseling so that you can see all the stuff you did wrong.
Hoping they'll point
and
it
I'm
out.
finding
I don't want to
that I
say
have
somebody at this table entered that way. No,
You show
about
up thinking
yourself.
the counselor's going to be
I'm
on
like,
your side,
okay,
and you find out.
and
Yeah.
this
I have a
happened.
list.
And then,
Let me open my PowerPoint.
and then you show up, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa.
I got to deal with me.
I got to deal with me too. It's like, that's not what I came in here for.
Can I tell you one of the things that Jen and I did in counseling, which I thought was like one of the coolest things? So we had this counselor, and she was amazing. But we started alternating sessions where Jen would go in and I separately, then I would go in separately, then we would have one together. Because this is what I realized.
We have issues.
I was like, forget about us having issues. Man, I have some stuff that's, again, spilling over into marriage. And, she's becoming the scapegoat or the reasoning behind that, or vice versa. Where it's like, no, I just got dad issues that I need, and I could save everybody a lot of counseling money. It's always dad issues, right?
Please don't tell the secret.
Earthly father, heavenly father. It's always dad issues. But it's like, and then the second that we started doing that, it was cool to even see the fruit coming more and more. And then somebody smarter than me said this, but it's like, you don't wait to take your car in when it's broke.
Right.
You don't wait.
I do. Every time. No, I'm just
You
kidding.
don't wait to take your car. Well, Jen's saying that because
She's
our
like,
car.
you don't.
She's like,
My car
don't mess up my pastoring moment. Okay?
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't wait to take your car. There it is.
My mistake.
You shouldn't wait to take your car until it's broken, but you take it in for regular maintenance.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's the same thing in a relationship.
Yeah.
You got to take that thing in for regular maintenance.
I think people would be surprised at how many of their peers go to counseling and go to therapy and just don't talk about it.
Right.
Tons of people do it, and other people go, oh, no one else does it. Tons of people do it. Everybody needs it. Like, we all have stuff.
Because I don't Facebook or Instagram when I'm taking if I was to take the car in for an oil change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the same thing with marriage. All right, there's a big, I'm going to take a left turn. There's a big, it's not a fad, but it's a thing going around right now called the Enneagram.
Okay.
Haley loves the Enneagram. There are some people at this table that don't believe in the Enneagram. For those of you,
That's right. I'm guilty as charged.
For those of you who don't know what the Enneagram is, it's a
Christian horoscope.
It is not a Christian horoscope.
it's a test. It's a test that you take, and it's not so much just telling you your personality, but some of your like spiritual like angst and issues, and how you deal with the different numbers or the different personalities on the Enneagram. Steph, you were nodding away. Do you know what your Enneagram is?
No, I never took it. So I was sitting here nodding, thinking, "Man, I probably should have taken it."
You should, yes. Haley will give it. Will let you do it right now.
Awesome.
So I'm on the Enneagram, and I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. For anybody watching that knows me, they're not surprised. That means I'm a challenger. Like I want to we have to get after this. We got to boom, boom, boom. That's the only way we're gonna fix this is by working at it hard and painfully so. Jen is a 9. Okay. Which is a peacemaker.
I can see Jen as a peacemaker for sure.
Oh, see, look at you. See Jen as a peacemaker.
I'm just saying, she's a peaceful person.
Jen, as a peacemaker on the Enneagram, how do you feel that plays a role in our relationship? Challenger to peacemaker.
I always want to resolve something, almost immediately.
Yeah.
And you're fine with leaving something unresolved and moving on for a while. That's how you process. But on the turn of that, I almost said on the flip side, I've learned that that's how you are, so I don't push to resolve it right away because I know that's not who you are. Like, I know that constant conversation to fix it
Yeah.
is just going to cause more friction. So sometimes it's best to just walk away.
Yeah.
Jen just said something that's key too, I think, in
She's
relationships.
brilliant, that's why.
She said, I've
funny, too.
learned to. I've learned to.
Yes.
I think part of compatibility, right? Compatibility is myth. We think, oh, you're an 8, you're a challenger, you need a challenger right along with you. No, you got a challenger and a peacemaker together, two things that seem incompatible, but she's learned your patterns and how to deal with you. In the message this past weekend, Bob said, we don't grow old together, we grow together. In other words, I'm learning about you. And I think because you're a student of Karl, you've learned how to resolve issues together, and hopefully he's done the same thing.
Yeah, I'm a perfect husband. Of course I am. No, but it's true. Like, you have to, we all have to be students of the people in our life.
Right.
Like, you have to be a student of your kids. If you have kids, you got to be a student of your boss, of your professor, and most importantly, the person that you are together with, a student of your mate. Because then if I'm like knowing what Jen likes and doesn't like, what pushes her buttons, it allows me to best serve her. Which isn't that the key to marriage? Is this is servanthood.
Right.
Yeah.
This is servanthood. There's a selflessness that has to occur in the union, or as that union is coming together. This weekend we talked specifically about the idea of leaving and cleaving, leaving one's family and coming together as a new family. I thought that was interesting that Jason brought his parents to this episode, and
we're working on
that. But
he's still cleaving.
But here they are. You know, again, I didn't know it was bring your parents to work day, but Jason did. He's like, I'm talking about marriage. I need y'all here. But no, there's something so beautiful about that process, but there's also something terribly painful.
Oh, yes.
About Stephanie, would you like to share?
Jason can tell our story.
Yeah. I'll try to tell the short version. Yeah. So get into the scripture that talks about leaving and cleaving. Another thing that Bob talked about was it's something that has an adhesive, and you're ripping it apart and you're attaching it to something else. Well, the process of taking anything that's stuck to something else and getting it apart is going to take some force, it's going to take some friction, some difficulty, and some violence. But we all have been like, just rip the Band-Aid off. So the quicker you do it, the better. And Stephanie and I think we had a wonderful way of displaying this early on in our marriage that I think has set the foundation. It was hard at the time. So long story short, Stephanie and I met in November 2009, got married in March of 2010.
Where'd you meet Stephanie?
We met at church. There
you go. We'll see you this weekend.
Exactly.
All the single folks.
Jen, where did we meet?
At church.
There you go. If you're watching this and you ain't showing up, that's why you alone. Here we go.
So that's 4 months. That's quick. And I, now looking back 9 years later, 4 months is quick to get married to somebody. Ray always says, make sure you go through 4 seasons with everybody. But we broke all the rules. I tend to break all the rules. So we let her parents know that we were getting married on a specific date, March 21st. We're getting married. We told them that, and they were like, nah, you're not getting married on March 21st. And kudos to Steph for setting that boundary and saying, yes, we're getting married on that date. And it was a difficult thing, but she set the precedent up front that this is our marriage, this is our union, this is my life. I'm leaving you guys, and I'm cleaving to you. Whereas I told my parents, hey, I'm getting married on the 21st as well of March, and they may have thought it was early, but they've known me long enough to know Jason's going to do what he wants to do. So if we want to be there, we're going to be there.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That's true. Pops nodding his head. Pops nodding his head.
So we were able to set up front, hey, this is kind of what we're doing. And unfortunately, her parents didn't show up for the wedding.
Wow.
Because they thought that we wouldn't do it. But from that point on, now when we tell them that we're going to do something, they believe it. And all the credit goes to Stephanie because she had to be the one to make that decision to do that.
It was so hard, and, it was a risk. I had to risk losing my parents for who knows how long, and for creating a rift that I would have to figure out afterwards how to mend that relationship again, and how to build or help them build a relationship with Jason and us as a unit. But I knew that if we bent to this now, then that would be conditioning my parents to feel like they have some sort of say-so in important decisions in our marriage. And so it was hard. There was a lot of tears. They felt betrayed by the decision that I was making, but we had to do it. And what I learned from that is, while it was scary in the beginning, God proves to be faithful when you are faithful to him, because God came around and reconciled this relationship so quickly and so beautifully. And, you know, they love Jason. I mean, everybody everywhere in Haiti, and everybody knows Jason and loves him. And they really respect him, and they respect our decision now. And so, you know, if you just be faithful to God, it's hard, and know that he'll be faithful to you in the long run.
And let me put an asterisk on this, because what I don't want is a whole bunch of people getting married quick
please don't do that.
And making their families upset. This was a decision we made with much prayer, much fasting. And we got we had close acquaintances because we were in the same church before. And I think it's critical that when you make those decisions, be ready for the ramifications of what you've decided to do.
Yeah.
And thanks be to God, as Stephanie said, we have a great relationship with our parents today.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did intense therapy too. For how long was it? A couple months or something?
Yeah.
I mean, intense therapy.
Yeah, premarital counseling.
Premarital counseling.
Now, Jen, our story, there was, like, I talked about your dad last week, and shout out to Fred. But
what up, Fred?
Yeah, but we talked about, like, me and Fred getting along when we were dating and all that kind of stuff. But our story was definitely some, like, bumps and bruises about that leaving and cleaving. Some culturally, some ethnically. I don't know if everybody's noticed, but you're white and I'm black.
Okay.
I didn't notice that. Okay.
Racially. But tell me from your perspective, what were some of the bumps along the way in that leaving and cleaving for you?
There's just so many places of growth, is I guess what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't until we moved out of state where it was like, well, it's just you and I now. Like, it's just you and I. So, like, I can't call anybody if something else happens. And it's like, I gotta figure this out. And I've told people, I think that was the best thing for our marriage, was to move, even though we had a baby and a toddler. Like, it was just phenomenal. But, yeah, the hard part was I was a daddy's girl. I was. Like, my dad was phenomenal. He's just fulfilled every need I would have had growing up. So I think it was hard to think, like, well, what do you mean I don't have him anymore, now I have you? You know, like, it just, that was a hard transition to have when you have a dad who was a really good dad. So
and that's been a huge lesson and example for me. Like, we have two girls, so seeing the example that Jen's dad set with her. So for me, I talk to my girls all the time of, like, I want to be the very best example for you, so that when that guy comes into your life, you're not searching for anything in him, for affection, for affirmation, because you've already received that from your earthly father, and you've received it from your heavenly father. But now this person can help to, like, be a supplement and an addition to the person that God wants you to be. Because that's what I saw in our relationship. I was like, I'm just adding on to what's been, what's been already set up. I don't gotta fix all these things. Like, he did such a cool job. And again, just for a young dad, that was such a kind of like mental note that I made of, like, okay, this is a great example, to follow behind. Yeah. Now I'm gonna end with this. Save the good stuff for the end. Intimacy. Yeah, there we go. Intimacy was the final point in this weekend's message, and we know it's important in all marriages. How do you cultivate intimacy? And this doesn't just have to be sex, right? But how do you cultivate intimacy? Jason, there's one way to cultivate. Okay.
I was going to share this with my parents.
Jason,
Look, they know what's going on.
Jason,
They seen your children.
they seen your kids.
You ain't married.
Jason, how do you cultivate and maintain that level of intimacy in a marriage?
I think intentionality is the key, which was something that I had to learn. So I am a 7 on the Enneagram, which I don't even know what that means. I just wanted to
You know what it
for a
means.
second. I have no idea what that means.
The enthusiast.
But
Look at me. I'm shining.
I'm a very spontaneous person. I hate plans of any kind. I don't like to plan anything. I want to go with the flow. Because if I plan something and something better comes up, now I'm stuck with the plan that you put me in, right?
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there.
We'll move on. So to my point, when you get married, the thing that I don't think that you understand, especially after you have children, is that if you don't schedule time for intimacy, and again, that's not just talking about sex, that's spending time with each other individually, going out on dates, doing all those things. If you don't schedule those things, if you aren't intentional about them, then it will not happen. And so our lesson that I had to learn, as you know, it took me probably 2 years of marriage to understand this, is that just because it's not spontaneous doesn't mean it doesn't matter. And also, spontaneity works when you're single and you don't have a whole bunch of responsibilities. But when you have a job and kids and a wife, intentionality and scheduling is something that you have to. It's something that you have to do. So the thing that I learned about intimacy is that it is okay to make sure that you are intentional about it and you plan it. And what matters is that you do it. Because if you don't, then time will pass by and you'll never go to deeper levels of intimacy.
I came home and it was like, Jen, I learned like this brilliant trick today. And it wasn't a card trick, but it was the wise Gil Stiglitz, one of our pastors here on staff. Gil told me, he was like, everybody's like, Gil's so wise. Yes, because he is. He's like, set a time right when you get home that it's just you guys. And we've been putting it into practice a little bit here and there where it's like, I get home and we tell the girls, like, nope, you can't talk to dad right now. You can't talk to dad right now because we're going to have some adult time and we're going to talk for a few minutes. I'm catching up on my day. She's catching up on her day before we get bombarded with all the stuff so that also we're not sitting on the couch at 9:30 giving each other the last of the day. We're like, I can't keep my eyes open watching this Netflix. What happened in your day? You know what I mean?
That's good.
What are some things, babe, that you think we've done or could do better that would really help cultivate that intimacy? I gave a good example, but
Okay. This is kind of old school. I don't know if people still read that Love Languages book.
Love Languages.
But I think knowing your partner's love language helps a lot. Because there was a while there where we thought we were serving each other. Where it was like, well, I'm giving you what I would want to get, not what you care about. And ironically, I have all the love languages. So.
With gifts. Like
gifts
you have double portion of gifts.
Free gift every day. But it took a while to realize those were his, like his is like words of affirmation, right?
Yes, we've been married 10 years. Yes, it's words of affirmation.
He used to never
tell me how good of a job I'm doing hosting
Figure this out. So I think, you're wasting your effort. Say you're married with kids. You have a lot going on. You don't have endless amounts of time to do things, but being intentional and knowing what's going to speak the most to that person about what will show them you love them, what will show them you're thinking of them. I think that's simple and old school, but it still works.
Dr. Caine, how would you respond as we bring it all to a close?
Well, don't have me close because that's...
Well, you started, so it's close. It's like a whole thing.
But what I like that you said about intimacy with the love language is that you cultivate the environment for intimacy. So sometimes we look at intimacy as like a particular event that we're leading to, as opposed to, okay, what is it in the environment? What is it that we can be doing on a regular basis to create closeness between us? So, for example, one thing I've really appreciated about Jason is that whenever there's a problem, even if it's a small conflict or issue, I know that when I bring it to Jason, it becomes our problem to resolve. I never feel like, if it's something as like, how am I going to pick up the kids and I got this going on? Or if it's something bigger, like, okay, where am I going to work and how am I going to make this work? He's always there with me, okay, we're in this together. Okay, let's figure this out. Let me think about this. And he's just invested in problem solving and decision making for little things and big things. And that has really cultivated a closeness with him that makes me open and happy to have intimacy in our marriage and builds that.
That's so good. Everything is about that process. Everything is about that process. There's the old adage that they say marriage is not about happiness, marriage is about holiness.
Which I think is a terrible saying, by the way. Just
Well,
want to say that.
no, you're gonna get at me with this.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
Let's go.
here's
I've been
here's
waiting.
why.
PTI, let's
Here's
go.
where I think it's my favorite show, is
Mike and
because in that idea of holiness,
Mm-hmm.
there's a constant process of that sanctification
Mm-hmm.
where it's less about me and more about God. It's less about me being the person that I am and me developing more into the person
Yeah.
that God desires me to be. So that's the angle that I take it at, where I go, it's a breaking down.
Yeah.
It's a breaking down of me and a establishing and growth
Yeah.
of us.
I understand that, but here's my take on that
Yeah.
saying. I think that as married people, we have to be careful what we say, because single people are going to hear it too. So
That's
when I've
good.
heard
That's
people
good.
say, marriage isn't about happiness, it's holiness. I'm like, I don't want to get married to be more holy and not be happy. That is a terrible it doesn't have to be either or. I think
Exclusive,
marriage is
yeah.
about happiness
And
and
holiness.
holiness. Jesus,
that's
not
good.
Jesus,
They
when
can
Adam
both
and Eve are
exist.
in the garden again, God says it is not good for man to be alone.
Yeah.
He wanted man to enjoy and to be happy with
Yeah.
the woman,
Yeah.
but he also did want them to be holy. You
Yeah.
know, that is an element to it as well. And marriage does make you holy, without
Yeah.
a doubt.
Yeah.
It shows you your flaws,
Yeah.
shows you where you need to improve. But hopefully marriage makes you happy too. Because if it
Yeah.
doesn't, you're doing it wrong.
You're doing it-
You need to make sure you come to the marriage retreat.
You
gotta come.
should
Yeah.
come to the marriage
Get some
conference
counseling.
retreat.
Yes, sir.
No,
Yeah.
that's a fact. Dude, this has been such a good time. Dude, I was talking to Jason. Having you on,
Well,
Dr.
Abby
Stephanie,
helps me
having
do
you
all
on, Reverend Jen. It's been so good having you on. Kurt says this every week. We want you to go ahead and like this. If anybody said anything, it's probably the women that said something smart that you enjoyed. We want you to like this. We want you to share this. And then subscribe. Every week, we've got good stuff coming here at the Flip Side, and we're so enjoying you guys being with us. Hey, Caines, Romeses, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you, man.